Win a brand new ride for Christmas in a 3-car raffle organized on behalf of Queen's Royal College. First prize is a luxurious, fully loaded royal ride, Ford Ranger. Draw date Saturday, December 20th at the school. Tickets only $100. All proceeds for the further uplifting of the school. Tickets available from teachers, parents, alumni, and of the school. Also at islandetickets.com.
Legends Sports Bar, Point Fortin,
6 Liquor Mart, Barnes Road.
Mileage Mac, Port of Spain and San Fernando.
Pitt Street Market, Aripit Avenue.
Mepco, Marabal.
Tony's Hardware, Belmont.
Shane's Supermarket, Aruka.
Hot Shop, Mukurapa Road.
St. James Pharmacy, opposite the Police Barrack.
Icebox, Riverside Road, Giraffe.
Dabity Discount Hardware, both outlets.
Color Shop, Dingle Martin and St. James.
Juma Supermarket, Valencia.
MS Food City, Tebe. For more info, call the college at 622-1671 or the hotline at 491-1802. Queen's Royal College, Christmas 3-car raffle.
WESN.
Hello there. This is Talking Point on WSN, the Content Capital. I'm Sean Michael Small. Start of another week, start of another day, and a lot of news happening, although we're still waiting with bated breath for resolution, hoping that it is not a negative resolution, hoping that to what degree it's practical, that it will be a non-violent resolution. It's one of those interesting things I find myself as someone who is quite or very much squeamish when it comes to the thought of human frailty and human casualties, but at the same time, unfortunately, that's juxtaposed by the practical reality of international relations just being, potentially just as fragile. For one, that is to say diplomatic relations, and two, the fact that at the end of the day, there's a reason why police officers carry guns. Now when you go into the world stage, conceptually, what does that mean? And it's not a clear-cut thing. America is not world police, I'm not trying to say that. But I am saying that you can't just say, let's just disarm everybody and hope for the best. Usually, that doesn't really seem to work out very well if you don't have the capacity to protect yourself or to protect others. So we're kind of in a catch-22 situation when you think about it, right? Is that, how bad could it get? I'm not too sure. Now, one of the things, though, that is potentially, for us, it's maybe secondary. For certain parts of the world, it's tangential. For the Americans, this might actually be more important than whatever's going on in Venezuela right now. Although I'll get to a little tidbit afterwards with regards to specifically the Southern Caribbean. Of course, you would have probably seen as well, Trump is declaring a permanent pause to migration from all third world countries. Do I agree with it? Well, on the face of it, no. I think as a principle, it's a very harsh thing to do. And I'm not saying that because I'm like, oh gosh, the poor people, or what about the poor people? No, I just think migration, a certain amount of migration is healthy. A certain amount of migration is beneficial. So it's harsh to some extent on the American society, right? In some ways, there are indirect benefits to us. One of the issues with migration to first world countries is mostly we have to be concerned about our best and brightest going there. Now, to what extent this is actually going to include that category? The people who go to foreign universities and do very well and are highly qualified and are highly capable. Because going to an Ivy League university, it's not about the education you get from the university, in so much as really it is about saying, I went to this university, therefore I am that much smarter than the average bear. It's a calling card. It's a hallmark of your potential, of your capabilities. That, depending on the situation, can open a lot of doors in life. Now, we would prefer not to lose these people. But it is rather harsh just overall. It's an extreme response to a situation that, to be quite honest, a lot of people would not want to admit it. But it got out of hand. It got out of hand in all the wrong ways because illegal immigration, at one point, during a sitting of some committee, the head of, I believe it was ICE, which at the end of the day, you could vilify them all you want, like the police. They are still a federal agency that by the law has to enforce the law. Basically had to inform, I don't know if it was representatives or senators, that illegal immigration, by default, is illegal. A concept, right? A distant conceptual amoeba that just doesn't have any basis in reality. And one of the key points he made was, if you don't like the existing immigration laws, as legislatures, you could change them, but as a federal employee, he couldn't change them. These two things seemed quite self-evidently reasonable to me. And therein lies the problem. The pendulum swung too far in one direction with regards to immigration in the United States, and now it's swinging probably too far in the other direction. And the issue is, I suspect the overcompensation will be course-corrected by a third level of overcompensation. And the actual situation will never be fixed because both sides will be more concerned about kind of getting back at each other. And it's like, oh, you made it this bad, well, I will fix things by going too far the other way. But whoever's perspective it is, it won't be too far. And then instead of actually finding out what is the correct middle ground, the correct compromise, because at the end of the day, that's what democracy is. What is acceptable to all of us? Instead of finding that point, it's just going to be to the extremes. Given the fact that politics around the world right now, Western democracies, we patterned our democracy after an old country that developed into a democracy out of a monarchy. But now it seems as though a lot of Western democracies are patterning the style of politics after what they see in countries like ours. An immature level of, well, I will just literally always do the opposite of whatever you did. Because I must do that. Because in the world where I need to clickbait and buzzword and emotionally appeal myself to an election victory, I have no time for practical debate, reasonable arguments, so we get what we get. We get shortcuts to emotional responses and decision-making to feed into that, as opposed to, let's kind of figure out what the actual issue is and come to a proper middle ground that's workable for everybody, including those with concerns about migration. So it is what it is. I'm sure a lot of people want to say, racism. Yeah, but the flip side is, a lot of countries, not just the United States, have had to tone back down the whole asylum-seeking illegal migrants do nothing wrong. Let's try to take as many as we can. And then when they come here, oh no, we are not prepared to help these people. So we leave them to their own devices to wallow in whatever poverty they find themselves in. In our country, we don't, this is the key, the governments don't want to acknowledge that it's their fault when they take too much migrants that society can't absorb and who are basically left in poverty and probably turn to a life of crime, not because they want to. Not because they want to, but after bravely or recklessly, depending on your point of view, but to some extent, it takes some amount of courage to go from their country and in many cases cross an ocean in less than safe conditions, to say the least, to end up in a country in Europe or America or Canada or wherever. After going through all that to get there, are you going to go home if you find out things ain't so hot? At least with Venezuela, it's an easier decision, right? It doesn't cost them as much to just hop on a pirogue. Oh, hey, Trinidad, not as good as I thought it would be. Let me go home. Some of them did that. It's kind of harder when you're from, you know, some African country going to North America or some Middle Eastern country going to Europe. That, you know, to just turn around, that's kind of hard. But you accepted them, which encouraged more people to come. Cool. But you didn't have a plan for them. So now how many of them are potentially suffering because there's no jobs for them? there's no route or avenue for advancement for them. Our migration, we never had these issues because it's not like there's hundreds of thousands of trainees going at a time or any one period of time, right? Annually, whatever. So it is what it is. It's a highly contentious issue, and most people are going to have an emotional response to what I said. It is what it is, right? The pendulum will swing back to the other extreme, probably, and everyone who disagrees with Trump will say, we solved the problem. No, not really, because those people actually have to deal with the consequences are going to encourage it to swing right back to this point. Because at some point, and this is something that not a lot of people see a lot of, residents in Chicago and New York and other democratic controlled cities were basically saying, hey, why is all of this free stuff going to illegal immigrants? As I can't remember who said it, but essentially social welfare services and open migration don't really go well together. And we experience that with our own public healthcare system and education system, because how many trainees are now saying, why are illegal Venezuelan migrants able to access free government services? You want to have a cake and eat it too? It is what it is. All right, moving on from that. Now, I'm not really going to go too deep into that, but Dr. Rudolph Munilal, Minister of Energy, he is saying Ralph Gonsalves' loss is because of his differing of opinion with Prime Minister Kamala Harris with regards to the zone of peace, U.S.-Venezuela tensions. Somehow, I don't think that's it. Somehow, I think being 5 terms deep into his stewardship of St. Vincent and Grenadines, I suspect that his country wanted a change. That might have helped the narrative of the change, but I don't think that was a thing. Now, I could be wrong. But I don't know. It's just that the 5-term incumbent reigning Ralph Gonsalves, Prime Minister of St. Vincent and Grenadines, not being able to get a 6th term because it's hard to get a 3rd term, much less a 4th or a 5th, something tells me that's the obvious angle with regards to his internal elections. But narratives will do what narratives will do. And right now, we are a society, a Western democratic international society, run more on narratives than actual analysis. And of course, for Minister Munilal, this kind of plays into the local narratives and the regional narratives. To be fair to him, I do think the whole zone of peace argument did take a hit when one of the most prominent spokespersons, despite the fact that he obviously had a stake in the outcome, to what degree, I can't say, but he had some sort of stake in the outcome, right? One of the most vehement spokespersons on this issue got removed from office. That is going to give a lot of other regional leaders at least some degree of pause. They're going to have to consider somewhat what's going on. Do I need to step off of this issue, et cetera, et cetera. But I don't know if I'm going to say that's why he lost, right? It will take the wind out of the sails, but it might be very temporary. Meanwhile, the HDC probe apparently is being widened beyond Ralph Gonsalves, right? HDC is probing several questionable matters. All right, that's cool. It's funny how you do this after the fact, because remember, a certain social media minister had very strong comments to say, which didn't really seem to be rooted in the actual facts for the most part, right? There could have, I'm not saying that there might not have been some sort of political funny business going on. It's just that the stuff that Minister Roberts brought up seemed irrelevant to what actually might be there, given the circumstances of the apartment. You can't allocate a $2 million apartment to low-income housing to people who apply for low-income housing, right? Let's not rediscuss the situation. Yes, there are people who point out specifics for the daughter's situation. That's not what Minister Roberts did. So if you want to bring that as proof, well, but there is something there, That's not what Minister Roberts did. So you're trying to come now after the fact to retcon his arguments. No, his arguments was Ralph Gonsalves. And overall, and the whole situation overall, not one of the three situations. Now the investigation is widening. And again, there might have been political shenanigans going on, but that doesn't seem to be the purpose of this whole exercise. This whole exercise started with, I need to hit Ralph Gonsalves with something. And now it's all, and you see, I'm not saying this is what it is, but it's easy to perceive it to be that, oh, now we have to justify that by widening the scope. Or maybe, to be fair, they did find something again with the Ralph Gonsalves situation. But what they found to say, oh, we need a wider investigation, has very little to do with his family buying apartments on the open market. However, they're financed, whatever the purchase agreements are. So this kind of rings a little bit of hollow, but not in the way that you would think, because really, what I think this does is it takes the wind out of these sails, not about the Ralph Gonsalves argument, but about the fact that, hey, there might be something with the HDC, but you started off with a crooked foot already, and now it's like the whole path is going to veer off in the wrong direction. That's what it feels like. You started off wrong. You started off with an aggressive political narrative instead of saying, hey, there might be issues here. And then you can maybe, this is how you do it, right? If you are a smart political operator. First, you mention HDC issues. Yes, you might have started from a different direction, but publicly, the first thing you do is mention the HDC issues, the wider issues, the potential for a wider investigation. Then you say, and in the course of our investigation, we have found some anomalies with regards to the purchase of three of the apartments by family members of Ralph Gonsalves. You see, that's how, to put it in a very cynical way, that's how you sanitize the information, right? That's the difference between looking like you're trying to do a political hatchet job and looking like you're a concerned public official that just happened to discover something that is of concern to the wider public. But hey, I mean, like I said, cynically, that's how you sanitize the information. On some level, I feel kind of sleazy even saying it. I don't necessarily want to encourage that level of motivation and intent, but I've reached the point now where at least give me that, at least fool me with some good nonsense, not some transparent nonsense. You know, at least do me a better sales job now. Be a better used car salesman. But right? Because one of the other things, again, the timing, the order in which you do things. The police are probing ERP ghost gangs and the payments to those ghost gangs after apparently they conducted an audit. Because the ministry made reports to the police, right? Okay. That somewhat implies that you shut down ERP before you had substantial proof about anything. And while in hindsight you are proven correct, procedurally, you jumped the gun. You basically said, we assume bad things are going on there. We're going to shut it down. Then we're going to investigate. Then we're going to make police reports. As opposed to if you investigated, then you did an audit, whatever, and then from that you make police reports and then shut it down. Think about how much more justifiable your position would be off the jump. Now I get it. You're desperate for money. But did you save that much money by shutting your ERP down a few months earlier than if you just did it in the proper order? But you know what? Our politicians, not necessarily that well versed in that level. I don't know how else to say it. Like, these are obvious things to me. This is obvious analysis and hindsight, right? But in what world does it didn't look good up front when they did it. And now when you see the obvious, oh, this is the path that you could have taken. Doesn't take that much effort to think it through. This is what we get. Not saying that it was done in bad faith. Potentially all of these things are in good faith. But it's hard for me to believe that when you're making, in my view, procedural errors. And the reason why I bring this up is I want to call out what I am hoping is procedural errors before procedural errors turn into this is how we do things. And then this is how we do things. If it's the wrong way, that turns into corruption eventually, at some point. Give it time. Because you're doing the wrong thing allows avenues and windows, doing things the wrong way, to then do the actual wrong thing. But, what do I know? You know, I only complained about a government for however many years, and then eventually, people had to vote them out of office. And now, everyone's in the fields because they have an emotional attachment to the current administration. And too many people think just because I want to support them doesn't mean that I can't criticize them. Well, hey, if no one's willing to say the emperor has no clothes, then he's going to strut around naked and we're all going to be the morons saying, oh, yes, your outfit looks fine. And society is eventually going to break down in situations like that because they're not getting the correct feedback. So they're going to keep going thinking everything's fine. Nothing to see here. I'll keep doing what I'm doing, despite the fact that the people don't actually agree with it. But what could they say? The emperor has no clothes, but who's courageous enough to actually tell him? To some extent, that's the political environment that we find ourselves in. All right. Let's take a break. When we come back, yeah, I've said this before. I really would just like things to go in a direction of resolution as opposed to leaving us hanging, because the leaving us hanging is stressing us out, but also the longer it goes on where things continue to escalate, the implication is the grander the fallout is going to be, or at least whatever the resolution is. And at this point, I think I'd rather a smaller resolution than a larger one, because a larger one might be far more reaching or overreaching. We'll speak about that when we come back. Stay tuned. Oh my God.
Win a brand new ride for Christmas in a 3-car raffle organized on behalf of Queens Royal College. First prize is a luxurious, fully loaded Royal Ride Ford Ranger. Draw date Saturday, December 20th at the school. Tickets only $100. All proceeds for the further uplifting of the school. Tickets available from teachers, parents, alumni, and of the school. Also at islandetickets.com.
Legends Sports Bar, Point Fortin,
Sings Liquor Mart, Barnes Road.
Mileage Mac, Port of Spain and San Fernando.
Pitt Street Market, Aripit Avenue.
Mepco, Marabal.
Tony's Hardware, Belmont.
Shane's Supermarket, Aruka.
Hot Shop, Mukurapa Road.
St. James Pharmacy, opposite the Police Barrack.
Icebox, Riverside Road, Giraffe.
Diabetes Discount Hardware, both outlets.
Color Shop, Diggle Martin and St. James.
Juma Supermarket, Valencia.
MS Food City, Tebe. For more info, call the college at 622-1671 or the hotline at 491-1802. Queens Royal College, Christmas 3-car raffle.
It's Christmas time, and with your family you'll spend every evening watching a movie on WESN. The classics that fill your heart with merriment and cheer as we celebrate together the most wonderful time of the year.
This is my island in December.
This Christmas, WESN celebrates with you as the content capital brings the big screen classics.
Yes!
Gather your family and tune in to WESN from December 1st to 31st at 8 p.m. nightly for We Christmas Movie Classics.
Santa's coming to town! Oh my God! Santa here? I know him!
Only on WESN, Content Capital.
Bill and Ruth fell in love with the Benjamin Moore color Dry Sage, but they tried to match it using another brand's paint.
I mean, it's close enough.
Almost identical, really. Yeah, there it is.
Never trust another paint to be a Benjamin Moore color.
Knowing how to tell authentic is as easy as 1, 2, 3. Find it, match it, search it. Step 1. Find the style number on the tag. Step 2. Match the style number inside the jersey with the number on the tag. Step 3. Search it. A quick Google search of the style number will verify the jersey is authentic when the search results match the jersey being searched. Don't be fooled by counterfeit jerseys. Before you buy, remember to find it, match it, search it.
Fan Zone, 2 locations nationwide. Center City Mall, Chaguanas and Movietown, Port of Spain. Nationwide delivery available.
All right, they queued me up for the daily review. Now, one of the things with regards to this whole situation, and this was pointed out by one national security stakeholder or operator, when I say someone that works in security and is a military consultant who also has a YouTube channel, right? And he does commentary with regards to certain, I believe, mostly conservative news media outlets in America, but he himself doesn't strike me as like a politically diehard conservative activist type, right? Now, one of the things that he said was what he doesn't understand. He, as someone who's former military and works in that space, never saw the US Congress basically concede its authority over America's war making. Because in order to go to war, you need an act of Congress. The President of the United States, he has certain discretionary powers, particularly with US Marines. But beyond that, you know, he needs permission. It's a democracy. He can't just, you know, because he don't like someone's face, say, hey, we're going to war with these people. And what he has pointed out, this American analyst, is that he has never seen, it seems as though the United States Congress is basically silent on the issue. It's one of those weird things where what is a major issue for us? And the thing is, this is not the first time where there's a conflict zone or high tensions and potential of military escalation that the international press doesn't really highlight, like say it does with Russia, Ukraine, or Israel and Palestine. There are situations in Africa that kind of just get mentioned here or there. There are situations in Southeast Asia. I think there was another military coup about a week or two ago that they kind of get mentioned, but compared to certain political darling stories, you know, they don't really get the same level of play or press. And in the case of, well, coups in Southeast Asia might not have the same level of casualties, but some of the stuff going on in Africa and some of the stuff potentially going on in Latin America. Now, the American press, they're kind of reporting on it, but it's not the same kind of, at least at some parts in time when this story first started, it was not the same level. Not the same level of concern that we did. And it's very interesting that, you know, the analyst was right. United States Congress seems to be quite, not completely silent on the matter, but you would think it would be a bigger deal because, well, because. Now, US President Donald Trump has gone even further, basically declaring Venezuelan airspace closed, which is one of those weird things where technically, I'm not too sure exactly, it seems wrong, but to say that it's illegal is in this weird spot where, yes, in one sense and no in another, it's a hostile act. But ironically, the more illegal aspect of it would be the domestic laws of the United States did he meet whatever requirements he needed in order to be able to take such an hostile act against a foreign sovereign nation, regardless of the legitimacy of its government? Because again, what do you mean the airspace is closed? Now, on some level, I believe civil aviation internationally have decided to avoid Venezuelan airspace. Our Minister of Defense has said our airspace remains open. Guyana said their airspace remains open. But it looks like at least some private airlines are avoiding Venezuelan airspace. The implication, I guess, is they don't want to necessarily risk the biscuit, but is it that the U.S. is now looking to shoot down any unidentified aircraft and doesn't want civilian airliners to get caught in the crossfire or get hit by accident, which can happen despite the improvements of identification technology and military radars and procedures and the like, right? It can happen. But the point is making this declaration of saying, hey, you other country, your airspace is closed because I decided it. And I don't know what the United States legislative bodies are doing. This is a very, very weird situation. Here's my take on it, though. I think one of the reasons why, believe it or not, first of all, I don't think Trump and Putin are that close of friends, as much as that was a whole thing with Russiagate or whatever it was, right? But I do think, ironically, that the international response to the war in Ukraine kind of sets a precedent to tell America, hey, you could potentially be more heavy-handed, and we're not really going to complain that much about it. Because at the end of the day, look at what Vladimir Putin did. He attacked Ukraine. Europe seemingly disagrees for the most part, except Belarus. But for the most part, Europe seems to disagree. And then America, at least the Democrats, seem to disagree. But while Europe disagreed, they continued to buy Russian gas. Or they still had energy deals. They would have continued buying gas from the pipeline, and that's why somebody decided they had to blow it up. Most people assume it's the Americans. Maybe it was the Ukrainians, maybe it was somebody else, who knows? In terms of, in a court of law, who knows? So, sorry, I forgot I did something. That's my bad. That's my bad. Yeah. At the end of the day, look at the response that the world had to the whole Russia situation. People still wanted to economically do business with the country that was their security threat, their security risk. And who sanctioned Russia? Who did the most with regards to sanctions? The Americans? Who's going to sanction the Americans? It's one of those weird things where the country who when we want them to, when it suits us, we want them to act as world police. But we don't always want them to be world police. It's one of those weird things where on one, you kind of see both sides. You can't have your cake and eat it too, but at the flip side, we acknowledge you have this level of power. It comes with responsibility. We don't like it when it's seemingly used for willy-nilly, for personal whims, recklessly, irresponsibly. So, of course, the Venezuelan government, President Nicolas Maduro, he has come out to say this is a colonialist threat. It affects the sovereignty of its airspace. It's extravagant, illegal, and unjustified aggression against the people of Venezuela. Well, this is one of those things where, again, I will say, similar to my complaints with regards to how the government handles some of the things I mentioned earlier, I think the Americans could have played their hand better to get a better response. But we are where we are, right? As one Venezuelan who I believe is living abroad, not in our home country, pointed out, she doesn't necessarily agree with Trump and intervention. But she also doesn't think Maduro is legitimate. she said, all right, Maduro is illegitimate, that the opposition won the 2024 election. And one of the things she pointed out is Venezuelans don't want America to intervene in Venezuela, generally speaking. But at least to some of them, Maduro might be so bad, they're willing to take the bad that comes with intervention along with the removal of Maduro. Now, apparently, there was reports that Maduro and Trump spoke. It was a tense phone call. Maduro, it was demanded he resign immediately. Apparently, he was looking to he wanted an amnesty, control of the armed forces. I'm not entirely sure why he wanted that, given that he wanted amnesty and time to negotiate an exit. Now, I think if all of those things were lumped together, I could see where the Americans are like, no, right? I don't know why he needs control of the armed forces. Unless it is only during the time it takes to negotiate an exit. I don't know what he means by negotiating an exit. But generally speaking, amnesty, yeah. Now, amnesty and being allowed to be taken to a country friendly to him that probably won't extradite him to the US, those are not exactly the same thing. So I think for the Americans, amnesty meaning you could then potentially come to our country and we can't touch you and whatever, and we just basically pardon you of all the sins that we said you had. That might be a bridge too far. But a lot of people think, why doesn't Maduro kind of try to exit to stage China or stage Russia and hopefully just stay there? The Americans probably won't go after him there and give it all up, because it seems as though they're hell-bent on removing him and he could at least try to live out the rest of his life there. I don't know how well that would work. Dr. Ellis pointed out there might be people who don't necessarily want Maduro to spill any beans that he may or may not know with regards to the happenings and international ne'er-do-wells in the politics in the region. But I don't know to what extent that's true. It might more be that the local Venezuelans, his internal competitors, might be wary if he continues on. But who knows? I don't know enough on the inner workings of the regime to say what is and is not the case. I do know that it's interesting because I personally did not expect him to ever want to try to leave. We've never really seen that with dictators, but the flip side is, in a lot of cases, not all, dictators don't have a good end when they run afoul of the Americans who actually want to do something about it. Whether it is implemented well or not is a different story, but look what happened to Saddam Hussein. Now, the fallout after was its own kettle of fish, but at the end of the day, I think Maduro would have good reason to say, regardless of whether or not intervention in Venezuela is going to have a good outcome or a bad outcome, is irrelevant to his own personal outcome. So maybe he is acknowledging that, and maybe because of that, he's looking to eject stage right. But I find it somewhat disappointing that Americans rejected it outright. Again, the only thing is, if he had an absolute position and he wants amnesty and he's not budging from that, and that's why they had to reject it, then I could understand that, right? Although, again, this is an opportunity to try to prevent a military incident that could lead to casualties on both sides, one side, regardless, right? Loss of life is loss of life. But if there was room to negotiate, this could have been a way to kind of resolve at least some of this without having to fire any more shots. Usually you say without a shot, but shots have already been fired. So, and here's another thing, and we've said this before. We've said this before. If anything goes wrong with Venezuela, we could probably expect a large amount of refugees trying to escape the turmoil by coming here. A situation we probably are nowhere near equipped to handle because their population is just, it dwarfs ours, right? We can't deal with that kind of flow. Because parts of their border is not necessarily the easiest terrain for people to navigate. And while, yes, we're across a sea, on some level, that's easier to trying to walk over a jungle or drive through a jungle. Then there's Guyana to the east, there's Colombia to the west. There's not a lot of options here. To the north, in any 90-degree direction in the north, it's us, basically, unless you want to try to go to a further island. So one of the interesting things, remember I opened up saying Trump closed the border to migrants from the third world? Maybe this was also a preparatory move. A lot of people say, you made a mess, accept the refugees, and he's probably getting ready to say no. Lord only knows. That's somewhat speculative on my part. But again, the situation now has escalated further. First, they fired shots. Yes, potentially, I have no proof, so I can't say affirmatively or not. Potentially at criminal elements, at drug smuggling. We've noticed a difference in the availability of drugs, in part due to the price of these things in our country. So there's some positive effect, whether you agree with the methods or not, right? We're not debating that. There's some positive effect, might not be all positive, but there's some. But there is indicators that something's happening with regards to affecting transnational drug smuggling and what it means with crime in our country. But it took shots to be fired for that. Now, airspace is being blocked. The thing is, my question is exactly how did they intend to enforce this? Because expanding, this is the thing, usually if you want to do tariffs and sanctions and they say, oh, you're helping the guy we're trying to sanction, we're going to sanction you. Now, to some extent, I think the tariffs were meant to be, hey, y'all want to de-dollarize, we could still tariff you. It's been a mixed bag, right? I'm not entirely sure if we have a full proper analysis on how that worked. But there's a reason why our government, I believe, is doing its best to be very diplomatic to the Americans. And as Karen pointed out, we didn't go deep into it, but the removal of tariffs on certain exports we have to the States, not the stuff that doesn't matter, but the stuff that does matter with regards to agricultural products, the fertilizers, the ammonia, et cetera, et cetera. That's not a small deal for us. So, this escalation. Now, Maduro has gone to complain to OPEC about US threats, which is interesting. OPEC has a lot of members in BRICS or that want to be in BRICS. There's a situation where the United States is negotiating with Saudi Arabia, who at times seem more of a hostile country to the US than in the past, given the actions of the Saudi Arabian prince. The US has negotiated a deal to sell advanced military hardware to Saudi Arabia, which makes me think that the whole economic alliances are not quite the same as the military and diplomatic alliances, right? Complaining to OPEC, how far will it go? Well, I don't know, right? OPEC actually may not want Venezuelan oil and gas to reach the market because that might impact their economic fortunes. But a lot of the world probably will, and people say America only does it for the oil. No, Venezuelan oil and gas is not just going to benefit America. It will benefit a lot of countries. It actually might not necessarily benefit us unless we get deals to commercialize some of it ourselves, the fields that we're connected to, right? Venezuela, well, the Colombian president, he also criticized the American closing of the Venezuelan airspace. I do find it's very interesting, this whole dynamic with Colombia and Venezuela, where at times they're not aligned and at times they are over the issue. And I guess this just speaks to the very real fear of escalation and what it might mean for the neighbors of Venezuela. Now, the Minister of Energy has said we don't have any commercial ties with Venezuela, which is true. Because of the sanctions, it is what it is. So on a very ruthless viewing of the situation, any sort of opening up of the Venezuelan energy sector to international partners will be a net benefit to us if you look at it strictly in that regard and don't necessarily factor in all of the other stuff. Right? But Marina Brown disagrees with me with regards to the impact on the price of oil. Right? But you have Guyana, Venezuela, Trinidad, all of course in close proximity. What happened when you had the war in Ukraine? And Russia was still exporting at reduced rates. Now if there's some sort of conflict here that's going to interrupt potentially the flow of oil and gas products from this area. Granted, Trinidad and Guyana are, generally speaking, to the northeast and east of Venezuela. So we might not necessarily be along the central axis of whatever the fighting is, but still, it's going to be a risky situation. An unprecedented situation. So it's not as though you know, hey, this is what goes on with conflicts in the Southern Caribbean, Latin America, so this is how we respond. As much as companies have had to deal with similar happenings, a lot of shipping, whether it's oil or cargo, ships going through past Somalia and Houthis have had to deal with either being shot at or being held hostage. On some level, they have precedents on how to deal with that. They've done risk analysis and so forth. Have they done that for here? I don't know. And then, of course, certain companies, big risk might not be that bad for them, whereas maybe the players here, small risk. We might not have the same size of ships, we might not have the same financial stake as, say, the Middle East or other larger producers. The kind of people who we deal with might not be able to undertake the risk of, hey, America started shooting in earnest. One of the other things I want to point out that I find interesting in this whole situation, apparently, is that Venezuela is increasing its capabilities, its surveillance capabilities on the eastern side of the country. And it's reported that face Trinidad and Tobago and other Caribbean nations, right? That's interesting. I'm not entirely sure what they expect to gain there, except maybe if they think American forces are going to be operating out of there, which as of now, officially they're not. But I've already said, most likely, and it's not that they intend to do it, but the due diligence would be, hey, there are 2 runways here. It's right next to Venezuela. Let's check it out. There's a port here. Let's check it out. So if we do need it, we know what's there. Now, will our government agree? That would be an interesting point. Because I think one of the things with this situation, and the opposition has come out, and I'll just say this briefly, the opposition have come out with a motion with regards to the Prime Minister, seemingly her position with regards to the whole thing. That I know was a whole other story in the House with regards to how that was implemented by the opposition leader. But its position on tensions between the US and Venezuela was a private motion. Well, our Prime Minister, for the most part, has, while she has, her tone might be inconsistent with her messaging has been consistent. Deal with the narco trafficking, international, transnational crimes. No, we're not for regime change or for attacking Venezuela or the people of Venezuela. Right? She has consistently said that. Now, her tone may have implied that the second part, something that contradicts the second part with regards to not intervening in Venezuela militarily, but the actual content has been that. So, if and when the Americans decide to do something and they ask to use our runways and they ask to use our ports, it'll be very interesting with regards to what the Prime Minister will have to decide then. Because that will be the point where you can't sit on the fence and you can't hide behind the narrative And I don't mean that in a bad way. Huh? I mean that in a very practical way. Because it is what it is, right? She's not necessarily going to condemn the Americans, but she's trying as much as possible to not look as though she agrees with it, the violence. But what's going to happen when she has to make a decision, when she has to make a stand? It might not come to pass that she does, but I am curious with regards to what will she do, because I don't necessarily know. I'm not saying she's pro-American. The assumption will be, oh, she'll just cave to the Americans. I don't necessarily know that. Now, she might eventually acquiesce to their requests, and she might do so for concessions on our behalf, and should we vilify her for it, I think it very much depends. And unfortunately, a lot of the factors that it will depend on, we might not be privy to in the moment, and that's what's going to make it a very difficult situation. And it's not going to be for the usual reasons of they don't want to tell us. It's going to be for significantly more severe reasons than we're accustomed to, because we're not accustomed to anything like this happening in our backyard. All right. Switch gears to the next topic. It's related to this, of course, and it's to do specifically with the radar system that's now apparently reportedly operating, by Scarborough, right? That's not the actual system. Actually, Scarborough, that's just an image of the system. A portable U.S. expeditionary radar, believed to be one of their latest models. It has greater capabilities than previous models, in part because it's more of a multi-role platform that replaced multiple different radar systems. And I think it's a reasonable assumption that the capabilities it offers differs, and in the ways that matter to a military, is greater than our air traffic control radar, which is things that we discussed to some degree on Friday. One of the things our Minister of Defense has come out to say, one of the reasons, or the reason, I'm not too sure if it's limited to this, that this radar is in place, is to track drug drones. Now, I did not consider the possibility of drug smuggling being done by long-range drones. Theoretically, I guess you could say it's possible. I'm not sure how practical it is or is not. Because while small long-range drones are not expensive for drones, they're not necessarily cheap either. And the fact is, how much could they really carry? But hey, it is what it is. Now, maybe they're concerned about other types of drones, but one of the things is, if you're, the actual argument for drug drones is the position of the radar is not necessarily the most optimal position with regards to helping Trinidad and Tobago secure its borders and keep itself safe, or keep us safe, right? A more southerly deployment may have been better, particularly if you wanted to ensure that, because a lot of people are concerned Venezuela might take pot shots at our oil and gas platforms, right? A lot of which are in the sea, some to the southeast, maybe there's some, to the north, to the south, etc., etc. But a lot of it is to the southeast. Positioning a defensive radar in Tobago is not necessarily the most effective way to look out for drone strikes or missile strikes against those platforms. So trying to observe air traffic to the east, yeah, the position makes more sense for that. I just don't really know how pertinent drug drones are as a concern, right? Because again, you have a narco trafficking submarine, how many, what, a couple hundred bricks or whatever, the kind of level of cocaine trafficking that went to Portugal, we're talking tens of millions of dollars, right? US, easy. A drone ain't carrying that. A drone isn't carrying that. And at some point, if usually these drones, they are deployed in numbers, but that's going to cut into your drug profits, one, and two, it's going to be very obvious, A, if we have 100 drones trying to fly north to deliver drugs to the next leg in the chain, that's basically a big arrow pointing, arrest the people here, wherever those drones land. But apparently there's a marked increase in illegal flights and drones entering the country to transport illegal drugs and guns. Now I get it, maybe to Trinidad, to get drugs to Trinidad, But then why put it in Scarborough? Because if you're trying to get illegal drugs and guns to Trinidad, well, those things can just land in the south of Trinidad. Yes, I guess the radar, assuming it has enough range, could pick it up, but that's not necessarily the most effective way to do it. So the Minister of Defense is saying that this radar is solely for domestic security purposes. I don't know. The positioning of it is very weird if we have security concerns with Venezuela. If our security concerns were with Grenada and Barbados, it would make a little bit more sense. But to be fair to the minister, one of the capabilities that this radar system has that our air traffic control radar probably does not have, because you don't necessarily want air traffic control to be cluttered with radar returns from all sorts of small birds. But I'm not an expert, so don't take my word on that. But generally speaking, the ability to track drones. There was a point in time when drones were effectively invisible, when the Americans first rolled them out. And technology advanced. Now it's not a thing where they're effectively invisible. They can be tracked. Radars have advanced. I don't expect our ATC radar to necessarily have that capability.
even when we got crazy. For that, they deserve some thanks. They deserve Benjamin Moore.
It's Christmas time, and with your family, you'll spend every evening watching a movie on WESN. The classics that fill your heart with merriment and cheer as we celebrate together the most wonderful time of the year.
This is my island in December.
This Christmas, WESN celebrates with you as the content capital brings the big screen classics.
Yes!
Gather your family and tune in to WESN from December 1st to 31st at 8 p.m. nightly for We Christmas Movie Classics.
Santa's coming to town. Ah! Oh my God! Santa here? I know him. I know him.
Only on WESN, Content Capital.
Three-car raffle organized on behalf of Queens Royal College. First prize is a Royal Ride Ford Ranger. Draw date Saturday, December 20th at the school. Tickets only $100. All proceeds for the further uplifting of the school. Tickets available at islandetickets.com. Sandbag Lotto opposite the Oval. Northern Hardware, Diggle Martin Main Road. West Star Liquor Mart, Montcoco Road. Top Office, Belmont. Hearty Foods Arima. Charlie's Anchor Cafe. Corner Anna Street and Aripita Avenue. Frankie's on the Avenue. Quasi Discount Mart, California. Universal Plumbing, Diggle Martin Main Road. Woodview, Tragrit Road. GAK Electrical and Plumbing, opposite Starlight. Western Union, Tunapuna. VML Minimart, St. Lucian Road. Arthur's Minimart, Balandra. Alum's Pharmacy, Majuma Crossroad. Madison Bar, Diggle Martin. Auto and Lotto Shop, Long Circular Mall. For more info, call the college at 622-1671 or the hotline at 491-1802. Queens Royal College, Christmas three-car raffle.
Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, The Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378 or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com. We're back here on Talking about WSND Content Capital Show. Michael Small with you. Now we load up the phone lines. You can call in, have your say. Call in and disagree. Have good points to make if you disagree, or switch the topic if you so choose. I know there's some people that might be fed up of this whole situation, but unfortunately, I mean, I am wanting it to be over because I don't necessarily like what this is hanging over our heads, what it does to some degree to our population. But technically nothing substantial on that level has happened yet. Yes, I know missiles have been fired, but to say that we have had serious effects nationally on us, on our society, hasn't necessarily happened yet, but still the waiting, the anticipation, it's not a nice place to be in. We're not accustomed to it. I'm not accustomed to it. It's both interesting and upsetting to be this close to history. This is not the kind of history you want to witness firsthand, really. But, like I said, we could change topics if you want to. Meanwhile, while we wait for conversations, one of the things that I do want to get into, still on this topic, current political leader of the NTA, former Defense Force Commander, Normal Dindial, he's calling for full transparency with regards to the radar installation. My question is why? Why are you doing so? Now, the report kind of makes it seem like he's not necessarily consistent with his arguments. I'll get into that more. We have Diggle Martin. But again, with regards to national security concerns, why are we entitled to full transparency? That's one of those weird things that I think we underestimate. But we have Diggle Martin on the line. Good morning, caller, on here.
Right. Good morning. Good morning. Two issues. Why is the PNM so disjointed? Are they really looking for Penelope Beckers to be the leader, or are they undermining her? Look how that debate on last week Friday basically collapsed. It shows that there are undercurrents to remove Penny Beckers as the leader of the PNM, and it's so sad. It is so sad. Another woman in office, and you have lots of men undermining her. All right. I want to talk about the radar and how significant it is with respect to locking down and fencing our borders. Going back to the Shiprider Agreement. The Shiprider Agreement was basically that. And during the pandemic administration, the evidence is there that murder rate was basically much lower than where we are. Now look at Tobago. Tobago, you just had a tourist, an American person killed, murder, I think stabbed. And what was the reason that he were left, I suspect, how should I say it? Because he went to purchase marijuana. And if he went to purchase marijuana, that tells me what are some of the attributes Tobago has basically advertised themselves for. The tourists come in and drugs is easily accessible in the island. A number of washed up drugs has gone onto the beaches of Tobago, right up the Caribbean, our East Coast, North Coast, all sort of things. Because if we clearly listen to the Minister of Defense, Mr. Sturge, he said the drug people are becoming very, very innovative. He also mentioned aircrafts coming into the airspace and going back out. And they're using that to drop shipments into the waters. They put in GPS, etc. Cargo vessels are picking it up. And they're using the GPS so people will pick it up at a later date. All of these things washing up. The Dominican Republic has a lot of that. That is why they are working with the Americans. Why are we afraid for the radar? The radar will help us. Because if the floodgate is open, based on what is happening in America and Venezuela, we have to protect our border. We have to manage the influx of things. Now, I'm going to paint a conspiracy theory again. The way the former government basically managed their border, was it wittingly or unwittingly left open? Were they doing it to basically help the people who are doing these things, the narco traffickers, the gun runners? Because if you remember earlier, there was a union leader say, to hell was the scanners at the airport. What that did, that facilitated through legal ports, guns coming in. The same thing we could say for the radar, they're facilitating something. And the fact that you went to buy 2 boats and you bring it down and they were non-functional, how can this treat with the drug trade when you have Go Fast boat who could outrun that? It is farcical now to listen to the big OPV they wanted to buy. Think about it now in what we have. You think they could have caught these Go Fast boats? So it's something cynical that the former government was doing. I basically think the radar will help us look at the drug traffickers, because we have a serious issue and we have not addressed it. When the submarine went down with the guy, the Trinidad soldier, the Coast Guard officer, in Grenada waters, how come we haven't retrieved it? If we had a radar, wouldn't it have been easy to pinpoint that? When all the oil spill happened in Tobago and they were turning off their transponders and using Trinidad waters, what was the reason for that? Wouldn't the radar have identified the Solo Creed? Look we're still trying to determine where we're getting money from and who is that person. All of these things are going to pin it on the chest of the former regime. They did think deliberately and to facilitate nefarious activities. Go on, have a nice morning.
This is the thing. Usually, I wouldn't want to speculate there without evidence. The problem is the situation was handled so responsibly. I can't say that you cannot therefore ask that question. I cannot say that it is, or I can't say that it is irresponsible to ask that question, because that could be an incendiary question, right? That you know, speculating going too far is usually not helpful. But the problem is the situation was apparently so poorly run that now it reaches the point where, well, what you said in some ways makes more sense. In some ways it's more reasonable to explain the situation as opposed to sheer incompetence. Part of the issue, though, is it happened during COVID. Now, I don't know how much drug smuggling was going on during COVID. But we know that something was happening during COVID to connect people from Latin America, from South America to Trinidad and Tobago. So was it drugs? Was it guns? Was it human trafficking or just, you know, illegal immigration? Who knows, right? I don't know what the actual people or goods or whatever that was brought over by smugglers during that time. I just know it was happening. Was it that the potential criminal concerns were that much still ongoing during COVID? Part of it is who had money to buy these extra things during that time. Now, maybe they probably were. Who knows, huh? Maybe certain, you know, people back in the day that had leaked videos of them partying in Hyatt may or may not involved narcotics. Maybe they were still partying in Hyatt and may or may not have involved narcotics and they still needed supply. But the flip side is that period can suggest that, hey, we really just that bad because we're going to lock down our country. But we can't actually lock down the borders. We don't know how. It is beyond our capability to do so. So we're just going to ignore it. But even then, we've reached the point where what you ask on that, with that regard, you kind of have to consider it. Yeah, at the very least, you ask the question, even if it might be too speculative, even if it might be a bridge too far, we still have to have the discussion. So now, to what extent is the opposition party, the PNM, willing and able to participate in those discussions? Because if they can't, that's one more cloud, dark cloud that hangs over their head that makes it that much more difficult for them to say, hey, the current government ain't working out, vote for us in the next election. Why? It was an obvious national security failure. It happened even at the time when migration is closed, the border is closed, flights are closed, all boats in and out should be closed. This should be easy. There are no yachties coming in, right? This should be relatively easier, at least. There's not supposed to be any legal migrants, so any new phase is technically illegal. And yet, it was what it was. And that's one of the things where I don't know if the PNM would ever be able to explain it. And if they can't, in the short to medium term, it undermines their credibility on national security issues. I'll be frank, particularly international national security issues. Now, are they disjointed, right? It was a private motion that the opposition leader presented. And she made no contribution to her own motion, to the point where the Speaker of the House needed to double check to make sure what he's supposed to do in that situation, because he didn't know. He just didn't know. We have a first-time caller. I'll just say this. I don't know if you could say they undermined her because she potentially chose to not have a contribution. I don't know if they advised her. We have Kokorit on the line. Good morning, caller. You're on here. Caller, good morning.
Yeah, hello, good morning.
Morning.
What's the procedures? Is this talking point?
Yes, this is talking point. You're on here. Go ahead.
Okay.
Caller, mute your TV. Don't try to fall on your TV. Just have the conversation with me on the phone. You're on air. Go ahead, caller. Caller, mute the TV. Caller,
Yeah,
mute.
sure. Oh, okay. I just want to be short. All right. Okay. Well, I just want to be short. Pertaining to the radar in Tobago, right? It is a conflicting report, right? Because the PM said that she had asked for it, okay, and then at one point in time, she had said that she had asked for the radar lately there, and she said that the radar is for security purposes. So if it's for security purposes, why it is that it is temporary? So when the radar is removed, what will be the procedures then? Will the time that radar there, will they complete all that they are seeking to do? So when the radar are being removed, what will be the position with the so-called drug cartels, whatever, that they are fighting against? So if we are security for the country, how something could be temporary?
Mm-hmm.
How it could be temporary? So it conflicted, and I was very disappointed to see that they had a press media or media conference. I don't know if it's the same thing, a press conference and a media conference with the chief secretary and the attorney general and the commanding officer, right? And they wasn't allowed to say anything, nothing whatsoever. Mr. Farley was asking all the questions and assumably answered all the questions. So I don't know that if it had a media was there, the media house journalists, whatever, and we had the CDS there. He didn't say a word to give the citizen comfort to say, well, that radius was so and so and so and whatever. If how it will be effective to the people of Tobago, whatever. He just said the answer is nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And also the Minister of Home, Sturge.
Minister of Defense.
Right. He just said that all is that is for his, he cannot diverge into no sort of information because it's of national security. I mean, what it is about national security? I mean, we keep hearing something over and over and over. I mean, come on, man. I mean, let's be open and let people know what's happening, right? You cannot have a temporary mechanism in place to fight crime, whatever. Is that it permanent or something like that? So you know what I mean. So they have the people confused right now because the Tobago Chambers of Tourism, they are concerned with that there. They are not comfortable with that there. So you see, it is affecting the tourism, and 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 they have to be mindful of that as well because that is how Tobago's drive their economy. So so we cannot have a security device that which is temporary. If you have to for something to to secure the borders, it cannot be temporary. So so let's be open and be transparent. Come on. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Well, I mean, now I could provide potential explanations on that last point, but that doesn't mean that they're the actual explanations of the truth. First of all, so for national security, I get where you're coming from. The situation basically with a device like that, a piece of equipment like that, it's a mobile unit, so it does suggest itself that it's there temporarily. The implication, one of the implications is off the bat, the security issue might not remain long term. What does that mean? That could mean a whole host of things. But given the fact that the Americans are quite seemingly dead set on attacking drug cartels, not that it's necessarily going to be a long-term solution, but perhaps they think that might be a long-term solution, and thus it wouldn't necessarily be needed moving forward. Now again, is it for drug trafficking drones or is it for other security concerns? I don't know, right? The placement is very weird because from what I understand, and I could be wrong, because the range is classified as short to medium. Now, other sites and publications say basically it's 60 miles. Could be wrong about that, but 60 miles means that from its location in Crown Point, it might not be able to see much further beyond the immediate waters around TNT. I don't even know if it actually gets further than the southwestern point of TNT, right? Not necessarily the most efficient places I've been saying before. If you want radar coverage to prevent smuggling from Venezuela to Trinidad, right? Somehow, preventing smuggling from Venezuela to Tobago, you kind of would also deal with if the radar was further to the southwest and further forward to the threats, and therefore you could just track things better. Now the thing is, it's supposed to be temporary, right? This is what mobile expeditionary things are. They're not permanent, right? But this won't be the first time that they might deploy a mobile platform and it kind of is left there on a medium to long-term basis. A lot of American and Army and Marine equipment is meant to be mobile. Whenever they say they put Patriot batteries in Israel, I don't think it's only meant to stay there for a couple of weeks, right? They're meant to stay there for quite some time. Technically, there's no permanent Patriot battery. They're all mobile. They're all meant to be deployed. America doesn't have static defenses around its cities. They don't have immediate threats to them. So on some level, as much as, you know, it's supposed to be a light, mobile piece of equipment, I could see where, depending on how it's negotiated, you know, if an alternative, a more permanent alternative is not implemented in time, it could potentially stay there for quite some time. We don't know what the time limit of this radar deployment is. I don't think that was ever discussed. I get where you're coming from, and it's not an unreasonable question to ask, because I don't think anyone has the expectations that it will be there for a long time coming, but it just might. And of course, there's the obvious, well, they might have it there for now, and then there's a more permanent solution coming down the pipe. Of course, the question is who's paying for that, what's the budget for that, et cetera, right? And in the meantime, the Americans are helping us out. But again, I find the position of it interesting. Maybe the range is longer than I think, but even if the range is longer than I think, I believe it would still be better for that piece of equipment to be deployed somewhere in Trinidad where it could have longer coverage on the waters going west and south of the island, right? Not just south, but also southeast as well, right? And you would still potentially be able to cover approaches to Tobago unless they want to take the very long way around, right? I don't know if maybe they're going to deploy a second radar, and maybe this is just the first one. But here's the thing. With regards to us having a right to know, on some level we don't. On some level we do, right? This is what I was going to speak to with regards to the former head of the Defense Force, right? Because he's saying we need transparency. But the flip side is this. You can't necessarily reveal certain things publicly, because what will happen is then, if it's an anti-crime exercise, the criminals will adjust. If it's a military exercise, your opponents will adjust, and it will negate whatever you're trying to accomplish. So that's the main reason why you just can't reveal things to the public, right? You can't reveal all of the details. Now, you do need to give the public an explanation. All the details and an explanation are not the same thing. You do need to give the public an explanation. I'm not sure if I like the explanation myself, because it doesn't seem practical to me. It doesn't seem like the best way to do it. Now, with regards to the press conference, I don't know if you should have had military officials there. Maybe you make them available in case there are technical questions that can be answered, but a lot of the questions that the public will want to ask, and technically the media as an extension of the public, They probably couldn't answer anyway, or they would have to direct to the Minister of Defense, as the Chief Secretary did. And he himself, on some level, and I can't necessarily totally fault him for this, he doesn't know probably what the limits are on what he could say, so it's better to err on the side of caution and to say as little as possible. Because again, there's something is going on. There's a reason for this installation of this radar, and if you reveal all the details to the public, you potentially negate the purpose it was put there for. So I get that, right? I get that. But I don't know if I get any real reason, because it's not fully adding up to me. And maybe they don't want to admit this is a pre-deployment for something bigger, but ultimately people are scared of it. Now, retired Commander Dindial, he is pointing to various legalities with regards to the SOFA agreement. If there are American personnel on the ground, if any laws are broken, it's governed by American law, they have jurisdiction, and it's not always something that we Trinbagonians want to hear, right? But also that this sort of deployment is not dependent on SOFA. And he kind of answers his own question here, to be honest. He's like, what are the basis for the American deployments? Well, at the end of the day, obviously, there's some specific action going on, and our government has been read in on certain amounts of details on this specific action and made agreements, and you don't need SOFA to approve foreign deployment in your country. And there's a lot of talk about our sovereignty this and our sovereignty that. And SOFA does somewhat impinge on our sovereignty again with the whole who has jurisdiction if an American service member is suspected to be part of a crime, etc., etc. We don't necessarily have to go that far. The whole sovereignty aspect of this is our country, and what's their military doing here? Well, at the end of the day, we are not giving up our sovereignty even if we invite them to come here. More importantly, it's a catch-22. We kind of technically should want the health to deal with the drugs. It's just that the baggage that comes with that, because it seems as though it comes with an anti-Maduro set of baggage, we might not want. So now the question is, what are you going to do? Because they're also one of our major trading partners. Because we're also economically dependent on them for, not just economically, but for food security. What are we going to do? Right? But I think there's more to say on that, but we do have Digger Martin back, I believe, or is this another Digger Martin? Caller, good morning, you're on the air.
Hi, good morning, Mr. Small.
Morning, morning.
I just want to make a little comment. People are calling for the Prime Minister to make comments concerning this radar and whatever it is. But you just cannot say what you want to say. If he does say things, it could affect you not badly. The mere fact that if he can divulge what he knows, Venezuela is going to say, hey, you see, we know this all along, the siding with America and the supporting America, and they could use that not in the eventuality, when a strike comes to Venezuela, they're going to target you, and they'll go something and Mr. Oliera. So that will be wary of these, questions to be asking the Prime Minister to divulge things. He can't divulge a lot of things, And the next thing is, this morning I saw on another channel, it's the first time I saw interviewed Venezuelan. I think he has some sort of thing with Venezuela, but he's living in Trinidad and Tobago. And that comprehensive report that lady gave was so enlightening. And I find it so strange that no other TV station or any reporters went out to any Venezuelans around the place and interviewed them. The only one interviewed is Justina Gonzalez.
Yeah.
But this lady, she knows a lot. And some Sofia Figaro, I think it is her name.
Mm-hmm.
She says that the machinery that Venezuela is using, a lot of those things from 1960 to start with. She says that that militia group they're talking about, the most of the people in the army over there is from Cuba, not Venezuela. She said Venezuela have a very small amount of people support them. And he said that they wouldn't be able to handle America to start with. He said because, as I said, elderly people that are taken out to help put with guns in their hand who probably will shoot, but they cannot manage it. So Maduro has found himself in a sticky position, you know. All the threat he was talking about, you realize he doesn't have the talk to back it up. So he's a little bit wary now because Trump is a no-nonsense man. Trump will bait you. What Trump wants to do, I think he wants to do, is to bait him to make the first shot across the thing. And from the time we do that, that will give Trump an excuse just to go in. But he doesn't really want to go in like that, just like that. But that, I am telling you, this is going to happen before the 10th of December. Right? So you take what I'm telling you.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks for taking my call. Good show as normal.
Thanks, caller. I agree with more or less what you said that the Venezuelan National's assessment of the situation was, particularly with the whole militia thing. Here's the thing, 4 million militia. The Venezuelan population, let me just look it up quick. Venezuela's population is estimated at 38.9 million. Right? Some sources estimated lower at 28.5. Remember, the whole how many Venezuelans left Venezuela. Some of them returned, some of them left Trinidad to go back, but how many had to leave, right? Because of the economic pressure. Generally speaking, though, it's close to 30 million, around that range. It is not sustainable demographically to have an effective militia of fighting aged adults of 4 million. From a population of 28 to 30 million. It is hard. Look at the troop numbers of Ukraine, who has a population, I believe, maybe like 10 million more or so than Venezuela. And they are trying to get thousands more recruits, or tens of thousands, or hundreds of thousands. They don't talk about their military in terms of millions, right? China's population is 1.4 billion. Their total military is 3.17 million, and that includes reserves and active. So to say that you're just going to have 4 million people that you could arm that are going to be effective fighting age individuals, and when I say fighting age, I'm saying it loosely because I'm not sure what is the upper level age bracket that includes or the lower level age bracket that includes. Of course, history has multiple examples of men too young in military situations at times of war. I assume it's not going to go past the age of 16. And even that, 16 is kind of extreme. But, you know, the upper age limit may be in the 50s, right? To be reasonable with regards to a military situation. Beyond that, and even then, 50 is pushing it, right? So, and the effectiveness of a militia. The thing with America is all of the guerrilla warfare militia didn't stop them from doing what they wanted to do in Iraq with regards to toppling Saddam's regime and getting Saddam and his sons and the other members of the regime out of power. It affected them when they wanted to try to occupy the territory. To be fair, it would have been irresponsible for them to just deal with Saddam and leave a vacuum. But the flip side is, by remaining, they set themselves up to look like occupiers because essentially that's what they were, right? And they weren't able to get Iraq's government really off the ground in any meaningful way, in part because, dare I say, not a lot of people really know how to do that, and every country in that situation presents its own challenges. Venezuela will have its own unique challenges, and American generals and the State Department, they're not well versed in dealing with that. Post-World War II, Japan and Germany were successes in that regard, but they had very specific reasons as to why things worked out. So, I don't know if part of the reason why the opinions of individual Venezuelans are not really looked into, in part because the whole situation went political really fast. And in part, individual testimony is anecdotal. I know of people who have spoken to me about the matter. They won't necessarily be willing to go on air, right? Part of it too is to find someone that's willing. Not everybody might be willing. Some of them might still have family in Venezuela. Venezuela does to some degree monitor our media. They did their research when they threw personal insults at the Prime Minister. They had to get it from somewhere. They didn't just make it up. It seemed to be quite targeted with regards to history. So it's not that simple. But even then, anecdotal or individual civilian testimony, I'm assuming she's a civilian and not someone that works in government, works in the defense force of Venezuela, or what have you. To what extent will people accept that? I will accept it, but a lot of people, they have a narrative on Venezuela. Oh, Venezuela's not that bad, and it's all America's fault, and blah, 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 and socialism is good, and Maduro is good, and Chavez is good, and what was before Chavez was bad, so Chavez must be good. And I'm not necessarily agreeing with that. But I also understand that I don't have like a mountain of statistical data to suggest why, you know, all of those arguments are completely untrue. So I'm not going to try to debate that issue. I believe that Maduro is a dictator. I believe that it's not beneficial for Venezuelans to have him there. And I pointed to one opinion of that myself, but that is an individual opinion. It's anecdotal. So that's one of the things where, you know, even I have to be careful. So I understand where you're coming from, though. There's something about the reporting of this story where you don't, you know, the international press hasn't really picked it up. They have stories, European publications, other publications, but they haven't really picked it up. And to explore all the facets of the issue as opposed to just to be stuck on the politics of the issue. Because it's the whole zone of peace thing, and the Trump thing, and the Maduro thing, and our Prime Minister versus CARICOM thing, that I guess a lot of people, and the way how a lot of the academics and activists talk as though, oh, well, the people of Venezuelans, they're fine where they are, leave them alone. I don't know if I agree with that. Right? And it's easy for people who don't want to see the Americans go to war say, oh, well, let the Venezuelans sort out their problems for themselves. Usually, dictatorships don't end like that. And in fact, look at Myanmar. They had a democratic president that got power taken away by the military leaders who decided, now we're going back to military dictatorship. And there was no one to stop it. And there was another, I can't remember which country in Southeast Asia was that recently. The military basically did something similar. Recently. Within the last month. So, it's heady times. It's heady times. Now, let me just check and see if there's anything else. With regard to the whole situation with Cuba, there's some truth to that. I believe U.S. intelligence believes, I don't know what the evidence they have to say this, but I believe the U.S. has intelligence that Cuba is operating in Venezuela, supporting the Maduro regime. It's just one of those things. The enemy of my enemy is my friend, right? At the very least, right? Can the Prime Minister say certain things? Well, again, yes, there are details that she can't say because it will undermine the purpose of the radar and whatever the Americans want to do. And the thing is, you might say, oh, so what? We don't care about that. We want to know. Well, here's the thing. Let's just say the Americans put the radar for a reason, and then they decide part of the reason is to support whatever operation they have going on. And we spill the beans, and the operation goes badly, and the American casualties. Now, we don't know if the fallout is going to be something that the current administration of America could survive or not. But what we don't want is us taking the blame from it. And it doesn't have to be politicians that point their finger to us. It could be the civilians. It could be the voters in America saying, why did you all interfere and cause our guys to get killed? Because at the end of the day, everybody has their own agenda, and the American population is going to be concerned about American casualties. To some degree, other people's casualties, but everyone's priorities are their own casualties, right? That's just natural. So we don't know what the agreements are to then assess whether it is right for the Prime Minister to give us the details or not. And because of that, we have to default to the position that there are certain things she can't tell us. That is juxtaposed by the, we need somewhat of a better explanation to hold us over. Will we get it? I don't know. But in times where there's great uncertainty, strong leadership, and strong leadership does not mean do what I say regardless. I don't need to explain things to you. You just follow my orders. That's not strong leadership. Strong leadership is showing a level of charisma and personality and engendering trust and invoking confidence so that we are willing to say whatever path you choose for us, we are confident in you, and therefore we're confident in that path. And even if we don't have all the information and the full explanation, we will willingly go down that path right behind you. That's what strong leadership is. Do we know how to practice that? And it's not necessarily a knock on the Prime Minister. I would argue she has given us stronger leadership than a lot of politicians. It's not too dissimilar, and people might not like this comparison, but it's not too dissimilar to Dr. Heath Rowley. As much as you want to complain, if you're their political opponents, about the political leaders, in the case of Dr. Heath Rowley, former political leader, of the two major parties, the alternatives were not better. Were not better, unfortunately. And if you think, hey, what do you mean the alternative is not better? If you think that sounds horrific to you, doesn't mean that it can't be true. And then the solution to that is not to basically try to say, no, they can't be that much better alternatives. What do you mean? No. Strong leadership, there is a void of it. And I hope that the Prime Minister will show us better leadership. The more there is uncertainty in this situation and others, the more that we feel that there are pressing concerns, immediate concerns. But that's a whole other thing to unpack, so I'm not going to go there. I'll just reiterate my point again. We don't have a lot of good alternatives to improve the situation that way. That's why the Prime Minister was elected into office in the first place. I just hope that we could see more, because her subordinates are not really helping the situation. I don't know who's advising them on what, but the communication deficiencies that I see with this administration, while not always exactly the same, it is making me get similar vibes in certain ways to their predecessors, and I don't like it, and a lot of people are not going to like me saying that, but it is what it is. I'm not talking about policy, I'm just talking about certain proficiencies which matter to me, which in the long run, whether you know it or not, might matter to you. But we'll see how things goes. Meanwhile, will it happen on the 10th? The thing is, I both hope it does and really wish nothing happens. It's a weird space to be in. Until then, of course, the show must go on, but in this case, we're going to come to a close until tomorrow. So I want to ask all of you to stay safe, remember your allegiance to the Republic and to each other. Thanks to the callers this morning. Folks, have a good day. Don't necessarily let this affect your mood and how you operate in life. There are more immediate domestic concerns. Put your focus on that, at least for the while, and make your day the best day that you can, because regardless of what's going on internationally, you never know what might happen. Human life is frail, and the fragility makes it beautiful. Enjoy that. Enjoy that. We should all enjoy what we have for as long as we have it. We'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
WESN.
This is 10 Questions. I'm Andy Johnson. Thanks for being with us here as always on WESN. Let's just tell you this. Credit unions play a crucial role in the economic landscape, particularly in Trinidad and Tobago. They contribute 5.6% of the country's GDP and are vital for mobilizing savings and providing affordable financial services. What is called key points are listed here. Economic growth. Credit unions are essential for economic growth, especially in regions facing challenges like rising unemployment.